North Africa, 98 million years ago. A land of towering giants and terrifying predators. Vast area of forests and wetlands support many species of herbivores, and wide, deep river systems are home to massive marine life, meaning that there is plenty to support a host of colossal predators for every environment. In the skies, pterosaurs like the long-necked elanqua soar through the air. In the water, crocodiles such as the long-jawed Laganosuchus snap up small fish and turtles, avoiding the colossal forms of the semi-aquatic Spinosaurus, one of the largest theropods of all time. And on land, many different families of carnivorous dinosaurs stalk their prey, from the fleet-footed and often skittish Afromimus to the long-limbed Deltadromeus. Yet all of these predators are subservient to the true master of the lands, the planet's largest living terrestrial predator, Carcharodontosaurus. Standing on a hill, looking over his territory, is a male in his prime, an indomitable, picturesque example of what his species can grow to be. 13.3 meters long, 7.5 tons in weight, standing over 3 meters tall at the hip. He may not be the largest of his species, but at 30 years old, having held a vast territory for years, this male, named Rourke, has come to not only survive in his environment, but thrive. Many scars litter his frame, the oldest being from other predators when he was young, while more recent ones are from hunting prey, and the newest, the deep cuts and punctures, are from fighting members of his own kind. For adult male Carcharodontosaurus, one of the most common threats they face are other male Carcharodontosaurus. Rourke scans the vast area of interlocking rivers spread out before him, taking in everything with sight, smell, and hearing. In the far distance, a herd of Egyptosaurus can be seen with just the top of their heads poking between the tall trees, as they browse and call to each other. In the wide section of the river, a short-necked plesiosaur breaks the surface for a breath of air before descending back into the water, filled with van-sized coelacanths and 7-meter sawfish. Closer to the male's hill, a smaller predator, Rugops, nervously approaches the water to drink, not wanting to be snatched up by the various monsters that lay in the watery depths. The Lord of the Lands inhales deeply and stretches his neck and back. He has a long journey ahead of him, as this is the time of year that males explore the entirety of their territory to find mates. There are several females whose territories intersect with his own, and he'll attempt to find all of them before other males do. Already the pull to pass on his genes is affecting his body. The crest on his long skull is darkening, and the pigment along the upper jaw taking on a reddish hue. Soon he will be in full rut, coursing with testosterone and more prone to violent outbursts. For now, he is in control, and heads down to the river to drink before his expedition. The Rugops lifts its head when she detects the giant approaching, and with water still cascading down her jaws, walks further down the bank of the river, not in any danger, but not too keen to be any closer to the Carcharodontosaurus than she needs to be. Rourke ends up over 100 meters away from the Rugops' original position, but as he nears the water's edge, his greater height means he can see over the finger-like mangroves, where a very different theropod is waiting. Laying flat in the mud, sail pointing high in the sky, is the area's other top predator, a male Spinosaurus named Set. 14 meters long, and even heavier than the male Carcharodontosaurus, he is the undisputed ruler of the waterways, and a threat even to a carnivore as powerful as Rourke. Yet these two enormous species don't come to blows that often, as Spinosaurus are some of the most strangely built large theropods. With short legs, newt-like tails, and crocodilian-like jaws, they spend the majority of their time in or along the waterways, while the more standard-looking Carcharodontosaurus stick to solid ground. The two don't even eat similar prey, and so there is little need for conflict, as long as they keep their distance. Rourke eyes the long theropod as he lowers his head to drink, and Set raises his head on his swan-like neck, getting a good look at the multi-ton predator. Rourke makes a low resonating rumble from his chest, an intimidating sound to anything smaller than him, but to the Spinosaurus, it was more of a reminder that he could see him and wasn't going to start anything. Set hisses slightly, but doesn't move. The sound alerts the female that was sleeping next to him, and she snorts and swings her head around groggily from being awoken all of a sudden. Set turns to face the female and honks slightly, letting her know they were safe, and she calms down. While this is happening, Rourke finishes his drink and walks back up the hill, leaving the couple to rest. Set is also on a journey of his own. This is just the first female he has mated with, and he will travel long distances to find as many as he can, though he will be swimming far more than Rourke. The Carcharodontosaurus in question has already spotted another of his kind, but it's not a female. It is a rival male. This intruder has come to take a portion of Rourke's territory, and as soon as he sees him, barks and screeches in challenge. No stranger to confrontation, Rourke bellows in response before striding up the hill to meet his foe. As they get closer, however, it is clear the challenger is smaller and not as heavily built as Rourke. Raising his head up, he can easily see over the newcomer, in fact. But the younger male doesn't stop and continues to advance and vocalize. His overconfidence may be due to him being further into his seasonal rut, making him far more aggressive and, unfortunately, clouding his judgment. The two males get to within a few meters of each other, then they lower their heads and slam their skulls against the other with incredible force. The bony crests that run along the tops of their skulls grind and then lock against each other. Then they begin to push. Right away it's clear the resident male is the stronger, and as he steps forward, the interloper's feet churn up the earth and he is forced to put one foot back after the other. The younger male roars in frustration and pushes back, momentarily halting his retreat, but Rourke growls. His own adrenaline levels rise in response. He pushes harder, and no matter what the smaller male tries, he cannot overpower his opponent. As his neck starts to buckle from the strain, the younger male breaks off the shoving contest and backs up, having clearly been outdone. Rourke groans lowly, a warning for the intruder to return to his own territory. But overloaded with hormones, the defeated rival cries out and lunges forward, mouth agape. Rourke sidesteps the attacker, raises his head up, and bites into the top of the smaller Carcharodontosaurus's jaws. His serrated edge teeth easily slice through the tough hide and muscle, and his victim cries out again, but this time in pain. Rourke shakes his head a few times, and as the enraged intruder pulls out of his grip, tearing lines in his face as a result. Rourke bites down again, this time on the smaller male's shoulder, and now his younger counterpart fully grasps his mistake. Squealing and thrashing around, he struggles to break free as the larger Carcharodontosaurus lifts him slightly, almost bringing him up onto the tips of his toes. Eventually, Rourke has had enough of tasting his own kind's blood, and releases the terrified male, who runs back the way he came. The deep wounds on his face and shoulder will soon close and scar up. Eternal reminders of knowing who to pick fights with. Rourke roars briefly and takes deep breaths, his surging adrenaline and anger taking far longer to ease than usual. With a huff, he turns and walks away from his hill in search of the closest female that he can detect. Along the way he will need to feed, and no doubt will be forced to interact with many of the different animals that share this vast floodplain that he calls home. Hello fellow travelers and welcome back. Today we will be breaking down the king of the North African lands, Carcharodontosaurus. The first remains of Carcharodontosaurus was a partial skeleton discovered in Egypt in 1914 by the Austro-Hungarian paleontologist Richard Margrove. who was working for famous German paleontologist Ernest Stromer. Because of the bad relations between Germany and the, at the time, British-controlled Egypt, the skeleton wasn't moved to Germany till 1922, and Stromer didn't describe the specimen until 1931. Before then, in 1925, teeth discovered in Algeria were described by French paleontologists Charles Desperret and Justin Savarin, giving it the name Megalosaurus saharicus, as the Megalosaurus genus was a wastebasket taxon at the time. When Stromer analysed his fossils, he noted the fact that the teeth matched those described in 1925. So knowing it was a different genus, kept the species name, and named it Carcharodontosaurus saharicus, the species name being after the Sahara Desert, and the genus name referring to the teeth. The serrations were quite similar to those seen on the great white shark, whose genus name is Carcharodon, hence the name meaning sharp-toothed lizard. Unfortunately, these remains and many others will be destroyed in World War II, when Allied bombers destroyed the Munich Museum on the 24th of April, 1944. Though many casts, diagrams and photos of the remains did survive the attack, including an endocast, which is a cast of the interior of the brain case. This would not be the end of the twist for those first remains though, as in 2025, scientists who examined the photos and diagrams of the remains and compared them to later found fossils discovered Stromer's finds don't belong to Carcharodontosaurus at all. In light of this, a new genus was named, that being Temeriraptor, a smaller relative that lived in the same time and place as Carcharodontosaurus. Now additional fossils of Carcharodontosaurus itself have been found across North Africa in the ensuing century, in countries including Egypt, Morocco, Algeria and potentially Niger. Though mostly cranial remains, many of the fossils found have since been attributed to other species or are not confidently assigned to Carcharodontosaurus, as much of it is fragmentary or in poor condition. So ironically, it started out as a wastebasket taxon and ended up becoming a little bit like one itself. Carcharodontosaurus was a theropod, and the namesake of the Carcharodontosauridae family, a group of mostly large carnivores with long skulls, short arms, and thin serrated teeth that have been discovered on every continent except Antarctica. It lived in North Africa during the Cenomanian stage of the late Cretaceous between 100 million and 94 million years ago. It was one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs of all time, growing to between 12 and 13.7 meters in length, stood 3.5 to 4 meters tall at the hip, and weighed in a range of 6 to possibly 8 tons, putting it up there with Tyrannosaurus rex, Spinosaurus, and its close relative, Giganotosaurus. 2007 saw an additional species added to Carcharodontosaurus, that being C. iguadensis, based off of remains found in the Ekka Formation of Niger. However, the validity of iguadensis is questioned, as the remains may belong to a completely different genus or even a Spinosaur. If it is in fact a species of Carcharodontosaurus, it would have been considerably smaller than Saharicus, being estimated to grow up to 10 meters long and weigh about 4 tons. Let's take a closer look at the fossils we do have, and break down its anatomy in more detail. Though we don't have a complete skull and are missing pieces such as the premaxilla and mandibles, estimates put the length of the skull at 1.6 meters and 60 centimeters tall all by itself. But while similar in size to Tyrannosaurus rex, it was nowhere near as wide as T-Rex's skull, which was evolved for crushing bone, while Carcharodontosaurus was more lightly built. Its use in hunting we'll discuss later. The lightness comes not just from the skull being narrower, but from the large antorbital fenestra, which is the hole in front of the orbits that takes up 30% of the skull's length. The top of the skull, called the nasal, had a rough or rugose texture, so it would have had a keratinous covering. Though it's not known what this may have looked like, it was likely the most well-protected part of the skull itself. You'll also notice these grooves on the maxilla. Though it's not known exactly why they were there, it is a feature that is completely unique to the Carcharodontosaurus genus. It also had thick brow-like extensions over the orbits. These may have been some sort of protection for the eyes, but it's also theorized that theropods developed these as sun blockers. While the number of teeth is debated, the average comes to about 62, with 30 in the dentary, 8 in the premaxillar, and 24 maxillary teeth. The largest got to 20 centimeters long. They were mostly straight with curved tips. The further back into the jaws, the more recurved they became. What is most insane about these teeth is the amount of serrations they had, between 18 and 20 per centimeter in Saharicus, and up to 32 in Iguadensis. However, they were quite thin, being the biological equivalent of knives, and so not as robust as other families such as the tyrannosaurs. To compensate for this, the teeth had evolved a way to reduce the likelihood of breaking. To quote, "The internal microstructures of Carcharodontosaurus enamel were shown to have cracked enamel tufts near the dentin enamel junction, a trait that may have made the teeth more damage-resistant and crack-shielding, similar to that of humans." End quote. Basically, the teeth had extra thick layers of enamel that made them less likely to break under stress from bending or coming into contact with hard surfaces like bone. Carcharodontosaurus also had a high rate of tooth replacement anyway, so when one or more teeth did evidently get broken, more would soon grow in their place, keeping the animal an effective hunter, and reducing the chance of disease that a snapped tooth could be susceptible to. With this long skull and razor-sharp teeth, Carcharodontosaurus had an immense spine force, between 11,300 newtons and 25,400 newtons. Nowhere near as high as Tyrannosaurus rex, but it's not really fair to compare any dinosaur's bite to T-Rex. As though they were similar in size, they were evolved to hunt and consume differently. Despite being its region's apex predator, Carcharodontosaurus did not have great binocular vision. This is due to its skull being so long and narrow. It did have some, but it had to orientate its head in a particular way. To quote, "Its greatest degree of binocular vision was at higher elevations, suggesting that Carcharodontosaurus may have habitually held its head at a downward 40-degree angle with its eyes facing up accordingly to achieve maximum binocular vision. They likely sense prey via motion parallax between prey and background, with a narrow binocular field of vision helping predators judge prey distances and time attacks." End quote. As said earlier, we have very little postcranial remains that are confidently contributed to Carcharodontosaurus, but we can assume that it had a build similar to its relatives, with a thick, powerful neck to hold up its skull, short three-fingered arms that may or may not have been useful in hunting, a wide, compact body, strong legs, and a long, muscular tail to counterbalance the rest of the body. We do have some vertebra that show, along with having large spaces for air sacs, may have had raised portions creating a hump or sail-like structure along the back, similar to what we see in the North American genus Acrocanthosaurus. Though Carcharodontosaurus remains are found across what is now North Africa, the region at the time was a massive network of tidal flats and floodplains, dominated by immense mangrove swamps, impacted by seasonal monsoon rainfall. The waterways were vast enough and deep enough to accommodate massive marine life, from huge skates and lobed-fin fish to multiple crocodilians, each evolved to feed on different sorts of prey. Dinosaur fossils are more rare, and almost exclusively large species, with a seemingly disproportionate amount of carnivores. Now, this does not mean that the region only had large dinosaurs, or that the area was where predators only hunted other predators. No, this is an example of fossil bias, as large bones break down slower and usually have a higher chance of fossilization. No doubt there were many small to medium-sized dinosaurs living in this region, and these would have all likely been prey for Carcharodontosaurus. Some of the known species that lived alongside Carcharodontosaurus include Egyptosaurus, a titanosaur, Rubacosaurus, a medium-sized sauropod, Deltadromeus, a potentially very large ceratosaur, and Spinosaurus, a rival in size and power to Carcharodontosaurus. It's long been theorized that the strangely built Spinosaurus would stick to the rivers and waterways to hunt, while the more usual-looking Carcharodontosaurus ruled the lands as the terrestrial top predator. This is backed up by isotopic analysis of the teeth of these two megatheropods that showed each did indeed prefer these separate environments, meaning that they would feed on different prey and thus didn't directly compete, so the environment they lived in could easily support two different species of theropod that both grew to over 12 meters in length. In fact, it's more likely Carcharodontosaurus went head-to-head with its own kind more than Spinosaurus, as multiple fossils have been found with bite marks on them, including the neotype with a circular puncture wound to the nasal. So the head was likely a common target in fights between these giants. Carcharodontosaurus, with its sheer size and specially evolved serrated teeth, would have been extremely efficient at taking down medium to large prey. A single bite would easily shear through even tough hide, inflicting catastrophic damage, either killing a victim outright or causing such deep lacerations that the animal would bleed out or be too weakened to fight back efficiently. Just because it didn't have the insane crushing bite force that T-Rex had to break apart bones and consume them, doesn't make Carcharodontosaurus and other large theropods less effective predators. Their teeth were evolved to slice and cleave through flesh and muscle with little effort, and it likely consumed the smaller bones of its prey by accident when pulling apart a meal or just swallowing an animal whole. Teeth are used for killing and consuming after all, so the long thin blade-like teeth of Carcharodontosaurus would have made cutting up sizable chunks of meat from carcasses extremely easy and efficient. While a lot about Carcharodontosaurus has been brought into question over the last century, there's no doubt it was one of the most impressive carnivores to ever walk the earth. And though it has had quite a few showings in media throughout the years, it often plays a backseat role to other theropods in the top 10 largest category. My favorite design has to go to the Jurassic Park Operation Genesis model, that gave us an amazing black, grey and red look. My first exposure to this genus, and it still goes hard to this day. But what do you think of Carcharodontosaurus? And for my question of the week, do you believe that the poorly assigned fossil material could indeed belong to Carcharodontosaurus, be it Saharicus or Iguadensis? Or do you believe that there were other large members of this family living at the same time and place as this giant? What lesser-known dinosaur would you like me to do a breakdown on next? And until then, please like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.